Before we prepare for our meditation, I'd like to introduce our speaker for today, Ms. Katherine McQuay Lewis. In addition to her day job with the federal government, Katherine McQuay Lewis is a motivational speaker, a workshop facilitator, and certified personal and organizational coach. Her focus is on being your best self, and topics include getting out of your own way, living from your highest vision of yourself, and staying in your own lane. She tries to practice these things in her own life and occasionally succeeds. Her favorite place to speak is here at UnityWDC. For our meditation and message today, let's give a warm Unity welcome to Ms. Katherine McQuay Lewis.
As you breathe in fully and expand your breath with the love of God that is within you, I invite you to exhale anything that blocks you from that love. And in the stillness of this beautiful place, surrounded by these beautiful people, just let it all in. The goodness, the peace, and the love of God. And think about what is important to you. What matters? What really matters? And remind yourself that what is real will last. The love, the kindness, the gratitude, the peace, the God who is within us, the important things will last. And in this space, feel how at peace you are, how strong you are, how right with the world you are, and how God is surrounding you at all times. That's what matters. And as we leave here later, we remember to trust. We trust that all is well and all will be well because God is all. Isn't that the most beautiful song ever? That, of course, is the Richard Payne Trio. And the song is Welcome from his CD Velocity. And for Richard and the trio this morning, and Tio, I have to follow Tio, right? Thanks. Thank you all so much. So good morning. Please turn to your neighbor and tell them you have everything you need. Okay, do you really? Do you really have everything you need? Wouldn't you like a little more money, more talent, more success? Or maybe you really do feel deep down inside that you do have everything you need. Because we really do, don't we? But sometimes we all suffer from the disease of more. If we just had more of whatever it is, it'd be perfect, right? Mark 8, verse 36 reads, "What does it profit a man to gain the whole world, but forfeit his own soul?" When we think of the world in that sense, we might think of money or fame or success, maybe that magical relationship or great popularity. And then there's our soul, our connection to the divine, who we are, and who we talk to at 2 a.m. when the trappings of the world are silent and we are alone with ourselves and our God. What matters then? Now, don't get me wrong, I am not against money or nice things. I love money and nice things as much as the next guy, probably more than the next guy. But the question is, if what we're longing for, or maybe even obsessed with, is becoming more important than our spiritual life. Is my relationship with God and my working on being the best person I can be, is that taking a back seat to the things of the world? Is maintaining my spiritual connection coming in second place, or maybe even lower on the list? Maybe you aren't old enough to remember the comedian Jack Benny, but he was notoriously cheap. And his joke was that when he was hung up and the thief said, "Your money or your life," he said, "Oh, wait, I'm thinking. What is it worth to gain the whole world but lose your own soul? What happens if we get that promotion or that house or that relationship, but we lose ourselves in the process? If we lose our connection to God and to everything that we hold dear, what then? Now again, there's nothing inherently wrong with money or fame or success. We are taught that it's actually the love of money that is the root of all evil. It's our attachment to those things and the importance we place on them. That's the problem. And when we are striving for those things, where does God's will come in? Have we even stopped to say, "Thy will be done"? Or are we so focused on what we want that that little detail slipped our minds? What's important to you? And at the end of the day, what matters? There's a famous poem by Mary Oliver called "A Summer Day," and it's a short poem, so I'd like to share it with you. Who made the world? Who made the swan and the black bear? Who made the grasshopper? This grasshopper, I mean. The one who has flung herself out of the grass, the one who is eating sugar out of my hand, who is moving her jaws back and forth instead of up and down, who is gazing around with her enormous and complicated eyes. Now she lifts her pale forearms and thoroughly washes her face. Now she snaps her wings open and floats away. I don't know exactly what a prayer is. I do know how to pay attention, how to fall down into the grass, how to kneel down into the grass, how to be idle and blessed, how to stroll through the fields, which is what I have been doing all day. Tell me, what else should I have done? Doesn't everything die at last and too soon? Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? What is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? That's a question that will stop you in your tracks, isn't it? And I don't think there's a wrong answer because it's all about what's important to you. But I do think that if you're sitting here today, and especially if you come here a lot, chances are that what's important to you may be different from what's important to the rest of the world. But it doesn't mean that it's wrong to want things the world has to offer. Emmett Fox says it's fine to claim good things for yourself, that we should affirm that we enjoy health and happiness and harmony and success. He says we just have to pray for the same thing for everyone else. It's not selfish if we're wanting the same thing for everyone. And we also remember that it's an abundant universe. Your success in no way diminishes my success. There's more than enough to go around for all of us. The idea of gaining the whole world but losing what's important is woven through the book of Ecclesiastes. Chapter 1, verse 2 reads, "Vanity of vanities, saith the preacher, vanity of vanities, all is vanity." We hear about a man, presumably King Solomon, who had everything, fame, fortune, the best entertainment, great company, but he was miserable. But by the end of the chapter, the writer has a new awareness. And chapter 8, verse 15 reads, "So I commend the enjoyment of life, because nothing is better for a man under the sun than to eat and drink and be glad. Then joy will accompany him in his work all the days of the life God has given him under the sun." And we are told in verse 13 to fear God and keep his commandments, for that is the whole duty of man. And biblical scholar Roy Zuck says to fear God means to trust, to obey, to serve, and worship him. And Zuck says Ecclesiastes shows us that the key to life is not in life itself, that pleasure, materialism, even wisdom are all ultimately futile and folly, and that true happiness comes from centering our lives on God and not ourselves. I believe, too, that we often mistake what we think is the will of God. And I firmly believe that often we don't know what's best for us and we don't know what's worse for us. And very often we think it's the one and it turns out to be the other. Now, how many of you, and you don't have to raise your hands because it could get embarrassing, but you once longed for someone so much you just thought your life would be over if you weren't with them? But it ended, and then maybe weeks or months, sometimes years later, sometimes only days later, you realize, oh, thank you, God. Thank you, thank you, thank you, because that would have been a disaster. Thank you, God. I had someone in my life like that maybe 25 years ago, and I remember crying to my mother that, oh, this was the worst thing, that we broke up and my life was over. And she said, "Katherine, when you get emotionally healthy, you will realize you don't want any part of that relationship." And she was right. And what God had in store for me was infinitely, amazingly better. thy will be done. But under the heading, there's often good to be found in anything, this was also the man who introduced me to Emmett Fox. So I got the better deal out of that one. And my relationship with Emmett has now lasted 25 years. I have to remember that my ultimate purpose needs to be in seeking out and trying to follow the will of God and remembering what's important. Because if I gain everything the world deems to be worthwhile, but I lose myself in the process, what for? I always read with great interest the stories in the paper about the very wealthy person who's now doing jail time for a financial crime, for trying to get more. And I think, for what? And when I was writing this, I thought of Bernie Madoff, the New York investor who ran the biggest Ponzi scheme of all time, and whose life and downfall is almost biblical. It's almost like a fable. Madoff was a billionaire who lived the life, the houses, the yachts, the parties, the trips to Europe, until he was found guilty of defrauding his investors to the tune of $50 billion and causing some of those people to lose everything they had and causing some charities to lose everything they had. Madoff had 2 children, 2 sons, and in the 7 years since he's been in prison, one son has died of cancer and the other committed suicide. Madoff is 71. He's serving a 150-year jail sentence. His wife doesn't see him, and he has a host of physical problems. For what? Now, granted, that is an extreme example, but the point is the same. A single-minded focus on something you are determined to get at any cost. I think I can go out on a limb here and say it's not the path God would have us take. Something else I believe is important in terms of looking at our own soul is minding my own business, staying in my own lane, because it's my soul I'm trying to save, not yours. Earlier this week, I was reminded of that because I got a text telling me that there was a woman at work who, truth be told, is not on my list of people I would like to spend more time with. The text said that she was going to be attending this very nice conference in Palm Beach. And let me tell you, there is no earthly reason, no work reason for her to be going to this conference. So I may have gone a little crazy and all up in my own head thinking, this is outrageous, this should not be allowed to happen. And at least I had the presence of mind to know that I was being ridiculous and that this was profoundly none of my business. And I had to remember one of my favorite lines, not my circus, not my monkeys. Not my circus, not my monkeys. And at least I had the presence of mind to also remember there is my business, there's your business, and there's God's business. And when I'm trying to be the ringmaster of the circus 3 doors down, I'm missing what's happening in my own tent. And that's all I'm responsible for. Sometimes we may want something for all the right reasons, but it's still the wanting that is making us crazy. Now, you've all heard many stories about my son, Alex, over the years. It's hard to believe that Alex is now 17 and a junior in high school. Thank you. But wait. That means it's time to think about college. Yes, it is. So let me put this mildly and say that the goal of getting good grades and going to a good college is something Alex and I haven't always agreed on. I think studying hard and going to a good college is very important, while Alex thinks getting to school on time 3 days out of 5 is a major academic achievement. I also think that much of a weekend should be for studying, and Alex does not. So it's safe to say the first 2 years of high school were a bit tense for us. But when this school year started, I had to ask myself my own version of what's the point in gaining the whole world and losing my own soul? What was the point of making myself absolutely crazy for something I felt was important and maybe damaging our relationship in the process? And I had to remember that he's a really good kid. He doesn't get into trouble, knock wood, yet. He has a great group of friends who are really good guys, and at 17, he is still willing to be seen in public with me. And we go to a lot of games together, baseball, football, basketball. Now, granted, I am paying for the tickets, so that probably helps, but we're still together. So I have to be honest, it's not like I have stopped badgering him about grades and schools, but I like to think that my attachment to the outcome has lessened. Thy will be done. And I have to remember that what I should be doing is praying, dear God, thy will be done. Let the best thing happen for Alex. Let him be happy and healthy and kind and compassionate and find his own way in life. Not, please God, let him go to Harvard. Because frankly, the closest he's ever going to get to Harvard is if we drive through Boston and make a wrong turn. But it's all good, right? One other point about trying to keep myself in check. So last week I'd taken Alex away for a few days for a trip I had promised him, and we left Sunday and came back Tuesday, so he missed Tuesday at school. So Tuesday night when he was playing Xbox for a few hours, instead of doing homework to catch up on what he may have missed, I may have been a little irritated. And I may have asked, or yelled as the case may be, about why he wasn't doing homework. And he said, are you ready? Because this is really good. He said, I've been away for 3 days. I have to relax. That's what he said. Are you kidding me? And I said, well, it's church. I won't tell you what I said. But I do have the tool of prayer, and I did have to use it that night. That story has nothing to do with the topic, but it was so good, I just had to share it. But along the line of caring about what's important, sometimes I think we have to be very careful about what the world thinks is important. We live in a very competitive part of the country where keeping up with our neighbors can be absolutely soul-crushing if we don't watch it. And if there's a gap between how you appear to the world and how you feel on the inside, there's a problem. Because if we're invested in appearances at the sake of what's really going on in here, something's not right. The famous theologian Thomas Merton writes, we must begin by frankly admitting that the first place in which to go looking for the world is not outside us, but inside ourselves. We are the world. In the deepest ground of our being, we remain in metaphysical contact with the whole of that creation in which we are only small parts. He says we have to remember that, yes, we are definitely affected by the outside world, but the outside world is also affected by us. So the goal is to make our relationship with the world a truly positive and productive one for us and for the world. Marianne Williamson suggests our prayer every morning be, dear God, where would you have me go today? What would you have me do? Whom would you have me talk to? And what would you have me say? If I am trying to align myself every day with the will of God, I can't go wrong. I believe I should always try to pray, dear God, thy will be done. And if I'm obsessing about something or twisting myself into a pretzel to try to get something, if I'm losing sleep or getting headaches or walking around with my shoulders under my ears like Richard Nixon because of the stress, something is not right. And I'll close with something from Bishop Francis de Sales. Have no fear for what tomorrow may bring. The same loving God who cares for you today will take care of you tomorrow and every day. God will either shield you from suffering or give you unfailing strength to bear it. Be at peace then, and put aside all anxious thoughts and imaginings. You know, if I could put aside all anxious thoughts and imaginings, oh my goodness, the world would be my oyster. And I can still seek the earthly pleasures the world has to offer. I just have to remember it's like the cherry on the sundae. It's nice to have there, but it's not necessary. What if everything I have already is enough? And when the goal is that all be well with my soul, that's when it all comes together and life is good. That's what matters. Thank you.